all about learning and teaching
will never embed itself in a meaningful.
is very crucial in our journey is to know.
They're not giving up, but they're grappling and they're.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a very new endeavor. This is Mufida's Majlis. It's a podcast. And the purpose of it is I would love to learn from everybody around because this is all about learning and teaching. And I hope and I believe that we're all on this journey on earth to teach and to learn. And I am just so excited to be a learner actually during these podcasts and to get all these amazing guests. I have a very special guest today. She has taught in different countries. She comes from the UK. She's traveled to Singapore and taught in Singapore. She has taught in China and is currently residing in the UAE and teaching in the UAE. She is, to me, an embodiment of what lifelong learning looks like. She's currently doing her PhD and also challenging herself to learn Arabic, one of the most challenging languages, if you would agree with me. And so, without much further ado, please welcome with me Victoria Hopkin. Marhaba.
Marhaba. Thank you for having me, Mufida. I'm so happy to be here in this beautiful Majlis.
I'm so excited for the conversation today, and I can't wait to learn from you.
Let's get started.
Let's get started. So before we even get into the whole teaching, so how many years have you been in the field of education?
That's such a good question. It's making me think how old I am. So let's backtrack. Let's say 20-ish years.
Amazing.
And then I won't give away too much.
So a lot of years. I think we've been if I'm asking about education, we've probably been learning since we were born. So you would be giving away your age.
It's been a lifelong journey of learning and teaching.
So I think my first one that I'm really curious about is where do you believe teaching actually begins?
It's such an important question to start with because a lot of the time we think teaching and learning begins in the classroom. But of course, teaching and learning begins from the very beginning. And when we think about what does it mean to be a learner or a teacher in a space, it means sharing. It means sharing ideas, sharing thinking. And perhaps before that, creating the space where that sharing can happen. For me, I think teaching and learning begins with that sense of belonging. Whether someone's coming into a space as a learner, or even if they're coming in as a quote-unquote teacher, they feel they're creating a space where everyone belongs. And then from that space, anything is possible.
It's so interesting to me that you did not mention curriculum, you did not mention knowledge, you did not mention lesson plans. Can you tell me a bit of why you didn't include those?
I think all of those things can be so critical in the success of the degree of learning and teaching. But before we get so wound up in what that looks like and what it should look like, if we haven't got those building blocks of connection, of belonging, of a relational space where actually that space is co-constructed, people want to be there and they feel valued in that space. If we don't have that foundation, the curriculum, the time frame, the framework that we're supposed to follow will never embed itself in a meaningful way.
Very interesting. So as Victoria, how do you mentally and spiritually get ready for a class?
I think, as you mentioned in the introduction, I've taught in several different countries, and those countries have very different cultures. So my answer now, with all of that experience, is that I come into a space with humility. I come into a space acknowledging my own biases, my own situation, and I come in with an openness to learn from where I am, with a humility to say I don't know everything, and I'm excited to be in a space where I can learn alongside whoever I'm with, as I am now.
I think it's quite interesting that you say that because I usually say a lot of teachers walk into a class believing that they are the fountain of knowledge. And here we are saying, actually, you don't need to know everything, especially in an age where technology is right in our fingertips. Children can get the knowledge.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably the critical part of the shift that we're noticing now more than ever, that teachers have to feel comfortable in saying, I don't know. That's okay. I'm not now less of a teacher because I don't know. In fact, I'm opening myself up to say, let's go on this journey. And more importantly, How can we together find this answer that's safe, that's going to be accurate, that's going to give us a varied understanding of the content that we're here to explore?
And I think it almost also kind of helps the children feel safer not to know when they know that as human beings, we don't necessarily have to know. We just need the skills to learn the new material.
And ask the questions, because how do we learn without asking? How do we build this space of teaching and learning without curiosity being at the heart of it? And I think not even rushing to answer the questions, but even encouraging the children or the learners, because we can be of any age, of course, to be curious to ask more. Well, that makes me curious about this, and how about that? And that's a great question. Can we also ask this? And then instead of diverging into something, we're kind of opening it up into more and more exploration, which is the heart of great learning.
Oh my God, I love what you're saying. So getting ready for this podcast, I was watching a lot of podcasts. And what I was seeing was experts in the field of whichever field I was watching, and they're the ones sitting there receiving knowledge. And it wasn't about them wanting to share. It was more of a space of them listening and hearing and learning. And can you imagine the power of just being able to sit still and receive rather than constantly give?
And I think that's such an important point, because so often we don't listen to hear, we listen to respond. Will never embed itself in a meaningful, socially acceptable to come in with our own answer. And actually, if we can learn to sit back, push our egos to one side, and genuinely listen. I was listening to an interview with someone from the royal family back in England. And she said, in a lot of these occasions, it can feel quite wearing when you go to another event. And she said, I make it my job to find out something from everyone, because everyone has something interesting to tell, if only you ask the right questions and you wait long enough to listen. And I thought, isn't that a way we should all be living?
That is so powerful. Imagine walking into school every day thinking you've got, whether you see 25 children if you're a classroom teacher, or over 100 children if you are a subject teacher, and that each and every one of those children has something to offer you rather than you are offering anything to them.
Think about that power balance. Suddenly, actually, you're much more of a receiver, and you're open to hearing all of these individual voices sharing what matters to them, how that creates this space of belonging, collaboration, and an amazing pantheon of learning opportunities.
So, as I was saying, new teachers are listening to this thinking, but I have a curriculum, but I have a lesson journey, and what would you say to that?
I would say, yes, it's tough. It's tough when you come in, because you have all this expectation of what a teacher should be. And here we are, as old soaks who have been around the block far too many times saying, it's okay,
it's all in
relax,
the heart.
take time. And they're thinking, I've got to face my line manager and these angry parents that my child is, making progress. I think what we're actually saying is life is a balance. This is my mantra at the moment. Life is a balance. And at the core of that is the students. And so long as you are holding on to that core, the rest will be shaped naturally around that. But I think what often happens is that the curriculum and the framework and the drive and the timing shifts us away from the people we're in the room for. And that's the problem that we need to redress the balance.
So when I'm thinking about my lessons, usually I'm thinking about, and I think it brings us back to exactly what you're saying. It's about the feelings, about connection, it's about all of that. And for me, as soon as you walk in, we need to hook the kids in. We want to create spark and awe. And a lot of times we talk about open-ended questioning and just ways of us to drag the children in. Then another thing that's very important is engagement. And I think you have a lot to say about that. So I'm going to leave that for you to talk about. And then we have transformation, what's happening within the child, that spark in the eye, I thought the D looked the other way, or, this looks like a 7 in Arabic. Mm-hmm. And then I think the fourth one, which I think is very crucial in our journey, is to know, was there progress made? Is there measurement? So that's how I walk into a class. I'm thinking about these different areas. What do you have to say about that? And if you have anything else to add?
I love those 4 areas. And of course, as school inspectors, you and I are very much focused on number 4, because we want to see progress in the classroom. But of course, your order is very interesting, because without number 1, we're not starting the lesson off with any engagement. We've got children coming into a space. We're busy as teachers. Okay, khalas, let's go. We've got to get started. Everyone sit down. And then we
Get
go.
your books out.
Yeah. And who's ready to start learning in that space? Whereas if you can bring those students in, if you can get them curious, engaged, wanting to be in your space, well, the battle is already half won. You are already in that space. So that leads neatly onto your engagement. Now, again, we've had this conversation about what does engagement look like? When I was a trainee teacher, it was, is everyone looking at me? Eyes on me. It constantly had to have that connection with all the students. But what does engagement really look like? Students engrossed, students talking to each other. They can't wait to get that pen on the paper and write. They can't wait to ask a question. So I think engagement is so much more nuanced, and we have to be nuanced in the way that we appreciate that in our classrooms. And then, as you said, building that connection, seeing that excitement of students getting something that finally it clicks. But also I want to add to that thing that you notice when that student's grappling. They're not giving up, but they're grappling and they're sitting with the problem and they're trying to wrestle with, how do I say that sound? How do I write it? I can't seem to get there. And actually letting them stay in that space, building that resilience, building that, I'm here as the guide on the side, but I'm not going to do it for you. You're in this space where it's safe.
Oh my God,
And
you're taking me to motherhood.
Yes. And that's where you get what you and I ultimately look for, is their progress, because progress isn't instant. Progress is developmental and it shows through learning and resilience over time. So I love your 4 and I agree with you completely.
And I love you. And I agree with you completely. I know you're not going to put that in. Okay, so if you'll agree with me, having been an inspector, and for me being in the classrooms and being in intervention spaces and just walking into classes and training and coaching, I'm sure, I don't know, this is what I have noticed. Tell me if you notice the same thing. We're walking into the classes, we're seeing beautifully scripted sessions, lessons, and then the teachers have a fear of letting the children go. And it's almost like there's somebody in the room, I need to rush them to get to the answer. And we're missing out on that piece that you've just spoken about, the piece of let them grapple with.
And then doesn't that reflect back on us? Because what have we done as inspectors, as school leaders, that's put the pressure on those teachers in that space to perform, to be the monkeys in the circus doing what we have told them they have to do? So I think in that way, the focus has to shift onto us as leaders, as inspectors, as is anyone in that space, saying, we want to see quality learning. And quality learning isn't a beautifully crafted script that moves through from here to here to here. It's a dance and it's messy and it's open. I remember having an observation when I was in Singapore. And in hindsight, the children were loving it. They were doing this performance poetry. They were doing metaphors. They were literally all around the classroom in chaos. And then the head teacher walked in and my heart sank because I had 10 seconds in my head. He's seeing this. I've got to get them all in their chairs. I've got to get them sat down. I'm being judged for every second. My heart was stopping. And then he left. And I thought, that's it. My job is on the line. I'm going to be marched out by the end of this lesson. And actually, the feedback was, your students were so happy. They were all learning. The conversation was brilliant. And I think that was probably a changing shift in my mind.
Amazing.
Of learning is natural and learning is messy. And if we can all step back and allow that to happen, we're making great spaces.
It reminds me of a time when I was in my classroom. I had a class going on. And I noticed that there was a bunch of children outside. They were sitting together, about 3 or 4 girls, and they were deep in conversation and they had an iPad on their hand. No teacher assistant in sight. And I walked out curiously. I just wanted to know what was going on. I was just wondering what these children were talking about. Are they out of class? Should they be somewhere? Should somebody be supervising them? That's what we're always thinking. Are children being supervised?
Mm-hmm.
I stepped closer. And these children were having discussion about a project that they had to put together. And it was so interesting to them that it was taking over their break time and they were just simply engaged in what needed to be done.
And they had a space. They had a space and a time.
Trust.
Correct. Trust and that desire to do more, to go over because they were enriched, they were engaged. So absolutely, those are the ingredients that we would want to see.
Correct. And I think trust comes in two folds. First, as a teacher, do I trust that what I gave them belongs to them? Are they going to love it? Are they going to engage with it? And then trust that my children are going to produce the work.
Absolutely. And that reciprocal relationship of, I'm going to do everything I can for you and you're going to do it in return for me. And I think that brings us back to the very beginning when you asked me that question of, are we creating these safe spaces and that relationship in those spaces where this can now flourish, that you eloquently put?
So that just takes me to the next question. Do you believe that everything should be explained?
Wow, what a question. Should everything be explained? No. I think there's something so beautiful about having questions left open. And even the idea of having no stupid questions. There's no such thing in the space. You can ask anything, and our job is to try and unpack that together. So is it okay to have things that are left unexplained? Sometimes. I've got my husband in my head who's physics and maths, and he would be saying, no, everything has to have an explanation and it fits within this box. But I think what you and I are talking about is the bigger sphere of learning. And I think exploration, discussion, often we feel as though there's a ping pong in classrooms. Student asks a question, we give an answer, or a peer gives an answer, but answer is always in the dialogue. Whereas actually, if we can leave the discussions quite open and explore, and dialogue is so important over explanation, I think.
Amazing. You were telling me about your professor in dialogue.
Yeah. So I was at the University of Exeter last week, sharing the current research that I've produced for my PhD. And I was listening to some professors sharing their current work all about dialogic teaching and learning, and how dialogue is so important in the classroom. And they'd spent half an hour telling us about the results of dialogue in the classroom. And of course, I then became that irritating student with the one question who unpacked it all by saying, but what about silence? We're talking about dialogue, we're talking about talking, but where's the space to hold silence and give students the space to listen, to think, to absorb, to wonder, to question, or just to sit in a space? And
sometimes I wonder, because of the education that we've been through, have we become so afraid of silence? You find people are constantly wanting to fill in spaces, whether it's social media, whether it's conversations, whether it's storytelling. It's almost impossible to find moments of just silence and being comfortable and sitting in silence, whether with our husbands, our children, our classrooms.
And isn't it funny? I think the older you get, you start to recalibrate. Silence is a gift. I think if you ask any busy mum if they'd love silence, they'd all say yes. That would
first
be a dream.
I'm afraid of silence. I don't know what they're doing.
Yes, silence is the deadly act. But silence with a cup of tea, to just sit with your thoughts, can be such a gift. And I think we rob our children of that. And we, as you rightly said, social media is dominating all of their mental space. And actually, they can feel really uncomfortable in silence. You can see them start to twitch and they need something to do. And actually giving them stilling exercises, giving them space to not feel they need to give an answer, even shifts their engagement because they feel slightly uneasy.
So my daughter and I would drive to and from school, and it was taking us about 40 minutes each way. And there came a time where I felt like she was constantly looking for new topics to talk about. And it was almost like, why is it silent here? Did you know? Did you hear? Did you? And I would say, do you know that we can just sit in silence and just listen to our own voices in our heads? So as you're saying that, I'm remembering that I had this conversation with her about 10, 12 years ago.
And what a gift you gave her. So well done for holding on to that for your own peace of mind.
I think we still need some more practice though. Do you have any memory of a time when a learner surprised you with what they discovered on their own?
Yes. So it was funny, as you were talking about your daughter, I then started thinking about my son. He's only 5. And my husband created this space after dinner where it often got a bit chaotic, as classrooms often do with any children. And he got some multi-link cubes and just started asking questions of, can you make 6 with these cubes? How else can you make this? What about this? And then he stopped asking questions. And my son just started building a 2x2 cube, 3x3, 4x4. And he was very methodical about building this. And we just sat and we watched, because suddenly he was taking this in his own direction and he wanted to explain the transition of how many he added and what it looked like now, and how he was then connecting that to multiplication. And I thought something that was so simple, that didn't really have a purpose, ended up being his, and he could take it in his own direction.
Amazing.
And the learning that came from that was quite astounding for a 5-year-old.
Amazing. But I'm also wondering what it's like living in a family of educators.
I often feel this. So my husband is a PhD. I'm almost a PhD. What does that mean for your children? And luckily for our children, we are lifelong learners, and we, through our own children's development, have first-hand experience that learning is not from A to B. You know, one child has gone this way, another child has gone straight and is already at C. And actually, I think as a parent, when you see that firsthand, you have to step back and say, gosh, learning isn't the way that I always imagined it as a teacher of, I've got to make this happen. So we often talk about Piaget and Vygotsky and say, is this just developmental? Are they ready for this? Are we putting the right things in place to give them the opportunities? And I think it's important to allow those students in any class to find their own pathway and trust that that's acceptable.
It's amazing. But I still want to ask another one. There's so many different philosophies in education. Where do you and your husband meet, or, not meet?
So I always thought we were quite aligned, both being teachers, both being driven, and we've taken 2 different pathways. Isn't it funny, as a parent, as a parent who's trying to get things done, you definitely go through, actually, we can add some bribes in here and that's okay. If we can get this, we can move on. Let's keep moving. I think what I've realized is that all the things that we say as rhetoric, and that I've said to you, hold the space, hold the silence, we have to really live and breathe it. We have to not lose our nerve, because whatever we believe in terms of philosophy, every child will present differently. And if we can just take that space and allow the students to feel what they feel, and one day they'll go here, and all the time we're just shifting with them, we're just allowing that natural progression to take place. I think that's the ultimate accomplishment as a teacher.
Amazing. This is fun. Are you having fun?
I love it.
Perfect. So would you agree with me if I was to say that emotions are not optional when it comes to education?
Oh, completely. So tell me what you mean by emotions.
I think it's just engaging the heart, seeing the child as not a vessel that we are instilling in, but a fully blown character. They're funny, and they can bring humor into the classroom, and they can bring upset too. And they can bring wonder, and they can bring questions. And so for me, I believe that emotions set the tone for learning. And I think I learned this very early on in my teaching experience. I started when I was 19, 20, so I won't tell you how long I've been teaching for. And I was teaching these teenagers, and I was just barely ending my teenagehood. And the kids were always swarming around me, and I was constantly just trying to put them on track, because that's what I thought I needed to do as a teacher. You need to sit straight, you need to answer straight, you need to raise your hand straight, you need to answer the questions correctly, you need to get 100% on the paper. And one day, one of the children did not perform well. I mean, several in the class. And in my older self, where I didn't know much about philosophy, I just knew what I had been taught and I was teaching it. I made all the children tell their grade out loud in the classroom. And this little Nadia, and I still remember her name, she was just mortified that she was going to have to say her score. And I insisted.
Mm.
And this child just loved being in my class. And I'm afraid, and I hope I never did lose her, because I did go back and say, you taught me something. But she ran out of that classroom crying that day. And prior to that, Nadia was always seated right in front of me. She was always happy and jolly. She would always be engaged with me. And that should have mattered. And that should have been enough, because learning is a lifelong experience. And so for me, emotions carry a heavy weight. And that's why, and I learned that the heavy way. Unfortunately, we meet people and we could somehow harm in our journey, although we don't intend it.
Well, thank you for sharing that story, because I think it's so important for your audience to hear that, yeah, we all go through these ups and downs as teachers. We're not perfect. We make these mistakes, and your honest truth of making that mistake with hindsight, I'm sure will resonate with a lot of teachers out there. So I suppose I'm wanting to take your question, because you've opened the door. Actually, how do emotions affect the teachers? Because as we've alluded to, the teachers' our emotions are so critical, because we come in with our stresses, our anxieties, our pressures. And of course, we push that onto the children unconsciously, subconsciously. And it's therefore our responsibility to hold on to our peace in that space, so that we are creating that space where we do acknowledge what's going on in this space. And then as leaders, we're looking at the teachers in our care, thinking, am I lifting this person up? Am I believing in them? Am I seeing what matters? Not just giving them coffee or,
pizzas every now and then.
Yes, a reward. But am I really understanding how they're feeling? And if they're not feeling so good, am I taking the suitable action to really understand how to lift them?
I love that. And it's part of why I moved out of the classroom and walked into teaching teachers and being there for teachers, because you're right. Teachers have been let go of when it comes to emotions and well-being. I think it's coming back, which is amazing. But I do think that if we hold enough space for teachers, we're allowing them then to hold space for the children.
I couldn't agree more.
I love this. And we're resonating. It's amazing. Okay. Okay. So you have taught in different places. It's fascinating to me. And you've alluded to it earlier, saying that it was, I'm going to let you articulate it better. But my question is, so you having had taught in different environments, different religious backgrounds, children from all over the world, multicultural, multilingual. What is the realization that you've come out with when you're stepping into these classrooms with, I think all of them have the goggly eyes. They're all there in awe, and, the teacher's here. But what is it that you realized that it didn't matter the context? What mattered was what was in the class.
I love that question. And I've spent the last 5 years of my PhD exploring that very question of what does it take? What matters? What makes it feel okay? Because I think there are obvious things like mutual respect, openness, honesty that are critical. If you don't have that, then there's a barrier that you have to overcome. I look more than barriers. I want to create bridges. And I think oftentimes earlier in my career, I wanted to step over into someone else's culture. I wanted to assimilate and try and be much more in their space as a visitor in their country. I felt it was my responsibility. But ultimately, in doing that, you kind of lose who you are and you become a second version of yourself that doesn't really fit in, because you can't be naturally in someone else's habitat.
Yes.
So what I've explored through my study...
Unless you change religion,
correct,
dress.
If you go for the whole... and I think, especially working in London, where there were so many cultures within one classroom, you couldn't even adapt. You had to look at that in a much more holistic way. So I think the thing that I've come up with, the philosophers before me, we stand on the shoulders of giants, is to say, actually, what we're trying to do is create this third space. To come back from full circle. At the beginning, we were talking about creating the space, creating belonging. And I think for me, cultural spaces, cultural communication, bridging that space isn't about me stepping over to you. It isn't about you coming over and just adapting to my way. It's about us saying, through curiosity, through respect, through connection, can we both step in to this third space? And can we negotiate what it's like to interact in this space? Can we ask questions? Can we be curious together? How can we ask questions by still being respectful? How can I give you an answer that gives you that sense of security? Because actually, for you as a learner in this cultural space, you might want really clear, direct feedback. That might give you a sense of security and understanding.
Amazing. You're sparkling while you're talking.
I am. This is 5 years. Finally, someone's interested. Thank you. And then for other people, they want the space to be open. And I think it's having that negotiated space where you can all be, fully who you can be whilst respecting that third space is critical.
So is it fair to say that you would rather have a mesh of cultures rather than have people who look, speak, dress like you?
1,000 times. Absolutely.
Isn't it so fun?
It's so fun. And you can learn about others. You can learn about yourself. You can explore. You can wonder.
You can mess up.
Yeah, because you're in a safe space. And so long as you're not offending, so long as you're not being judgmental.
And that's what I mean, that sometimes you could offend and not even know because it's culturally different. But then if
the
that
openness
space...
and the respect. And also that's why we talk about the kind of agreed terminology and conditions of, and I'll often say to you, Mufida, can I ask you about this? I mean, genuine curiosity. And I think when you ask those questions and you get a genuine answer, you're in a safer space because you know what's okay and what's not okay.
Do you think people are afraid to ask?
Absolutely. I think people aren't afraid because they're afraid for making a mistake. They're afraid of hurting people. They're afraid of being judged for being ignorant or for being out of their comfort zone. Whereas I think actually all of that, as we said, rests on that respect, that mutual care. And if you have that in place, you can ask those questions.
But my wonder is as well, are the people who are afraid to ask also afraid to be asked? Or would they rather that we step into understanding them better? So is it like they already are afraid of being questioned? They feel like it's offensive? Or is it just that they're afraid of stepping into another culture?
I think that's interesting. And I think that's why the third space works for me, because it requires everyone to step in. And that's an action. And that's, you can be welcomed in, but you can't force someone. You can't drag them or push them into that space. They have to enter. And they might enter on the periphery and just say, I'm not going to jump right in, but I want to be here, seeing what this feels like. And hopefully, the more that you can create that inclusive, warm, welcoming space, those people will come in further and further. And without even knowing it, they've opened themselves up and feel more connected.
Very interesting. I think in my own life, I've always been very mindful of it. So I've also I've lived in many different countries. And for me, it's always been, I'm walking to you to let you know. I think it's a personal responsibility. I'm coming to you to let you know, Victoria, you can ask me about my religion. You can ask me about where I'm from. You can ask me about my information, my knowledge. You're free and it's an open door and you can ask. And I think that has allowed me to make a lot of friends from different cultures as well, because it's just made it feel, comfortable, because I want you to ask because it makes me feel valued to you. And I think being in a country where we're mostly Arabs, I think it also, there's a duty on us as well as Arabs to step into the guests that are coming into the country and say, we're not going to be offended. Ask, rather than make a mistake and then it might be offensive.
I love that. And I love that you bring that because, as you say, we're visitors into this beautiful country and we want to learn and we want to explore and we want to understand. And actually, when you feel welcomed into that space, you and I are the epitome of that. We've both entered in. We're exploring what it is to be in each other's space and culture, and then create that so that other people can also come into this space that we've created, can learn with us in this space, can ask the questions. And that all becomes an invitation to join in and have the conversation.
The bridge that you keep talking about. So you're on a new journey of creating bridges in international schools. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So as you know, as both of us are coaches, we believe that building those bridges is all about opening up that communication, giving people the time and space to talk. And I think that's the journey that we're embarking on now, to say, how much of this can we bring into schools where we support other staff, we support teachers, we support leaders to create that space where bridges can be built and divides can be overcome, both in the learning of Arabic as a language and also the general cultural space where we're all in this wonderful space, this beautiful country. We can learn from each other here, but sometimes people just need a bit of support in how to manage that effectively.
Amazing. So on that note, we'll like to talk to the viewers and let you know that what we're doing is Victoria and I are working on building bridges in a very, hopefully, safe way in which, we look very different, but we're preaching the same thing. And what we want to do is, go to schools, go to a leadership and create a bridge for them between them and the Arabic teachers within the school.
Okay, so now do it with conviction. Don't say, hopefully, maybe one day.
Okay.
Like, so now this is what we're going to do.
Okay.
You better watch out. Well, we're ready. You're coming.
Okay. And that takes us to let you know about the new venture Victoria and I are embarking on, a new journey of building bridges. And the intention that we have is to support leaders and to support teachers in bridging the gap between the Western culture and the Middle Eastern culture. Do you want to tell us more about it?
Absolutely. So our new venture is to support schools in doing exactly what we've done, which is to build bridges. We have seen the beauty of Arabic language in these international schools and the need to perhaps build that bridge so that the understanding of Western pedagogy, a British-centric approach, can blend beautifully with the Middle Eastern teaching style and the curriculum, and we can create something that's so powerful through a coaching methodology, through in-class, culturally based coaching, which is critical, I think, to what we've established. Yes. We can't bring in a one-size-fits-all approach. We need to look at the cultural dynamics and really let that breathe into the work we're doing to support, as you say, class teachers, school leaders, and then everyone in between to create this really
and
harmonious
the children as
space.
Well. The
Absolutely.
Children. Like you end up finding in international schools, all the leadership are from Western societies, handling and dealing with about 50 to 60% of Arabic students with no cultural background about the Arabs, the Arab culture, the religion.
And I think, we often talk about IQ in education. We've shifted into thinking about EQ and emotional intelligence, but it's actually now that cultural intelligence that has to come to the fore. Understanding what ECQ is, understanding how to embed it within your school systems is going to be one of those core building blocks to creating this bridge that we can establish.
So what do you think is the pain point in schools that we are working to bridge?
I think what we're wanting to do is open up the conversation. I think what you and I have noticed through our years of experience working in this field is that sometimes everyone just needs a little bit of love and a little bit of support to shift and see things slightly differently. And I think through shifting and understanding, this is a cultural dynamic that if I understand that it's cultural and I can understand that this matters to you, well, then actually I can work better with you. Our relationship can be better because I understand that about you.
And instead of dancing individually, we can have
much more meaningful connections. And through that level of understanding, the work can be, even more heightened in terms of performance because we're both trying to get to the same thing, but we might just be coming from slightly different avenues to get there.
Great. Thank you. So what fascinates you about the Arabic culture? You are learning Arabic. You've been in the country for long and you're fully embracing it.
I think Arabic language, so Arab culture, Arabic language is just phenomenal in terms of its difference and its collective understanding. So whether you speak one of the dialects of Lebanese or Egyptian, or you're from Tunisia, you have all of this food, you have this different culture, but actually you all share this Arab culture and you have this welcoming, come in, be my guest, I want to feed you, I want to talk with you. And I think that welcoming space has been so beautiful to learn about the culture, learn about the beautiful script of Arabic, and then understand how the language and the culture come together. And when you can bring those two things, your level of appreciation for Arabic just is tenfold.
Amazing. Okay, to round up, but I have a question before we do that. Let's talk about imposter syndrome. We find that a lot in schools, we have a lot of female teachers. But as you go up the hierarchy, what's happening?
Isn't it sad? I think we look at this. If you look at any school website, you typically see women in primary leadership, men in secondary leadership. Not all cases, of course.
No.
But there is
Majority.
definitely a clear pattern. And when you go to big conferences, you often see men walking around and they're doing it. And I look at the women and I look at my colleagues and I think we're all so capable, but somehow there's a voice that says you're not. And I think being in this beautiful country, being in this amazing network of women in education, women in educational leadership, we are so blessed that we have this sisterhood around us. We all believe in each other and we can all be the other voice on the shoulder that says, yes, you can do it. And I think that's so important to lean on that voice, because sometimes our own voice can get too loud. But if we can lean on those around us who are supporting us, who are singing to us that this is all possible, if we can believe in that, if we can have each other as that connection, then we'll be stronger for it.
Thank you so much, Victoria. It was just so beautiful to have you with me today. I have absolutely enjoyed this. I hope you have too.
I have. And thank you for being the voice on my shoulder.
I will always
saying
be that.
It's okay.
You've done brilliantly. And you're shining on. And we're so blessed to have you in the country, so blessed to have your voice speaking loud and clear about bridging cultures. I think it's so important. And I'm so excited for our new venture. And I can't wait to see how much we're going to do, because we will. We're building an empire. Well, we're coming to an end of this episode. It's been just so amazing to have you, Victoria, as my first guest. And I'm so excited for our new venture. And if you would like to bridge with us, please do connect with us. We are all about connections. We're all about bridging. We've talked about emotional intelligence, but there's also cultural intelligence that we want to bring into the mix. And we're here to do that with you, to support your school systems, to support you as individual teachers, whatever it is that you need. We are here for you. And that's our mission.
Tamam.
And thank you so much for tuning in today. It has been a pleasure to be your hostess. And I am looking forward to our next podcast. And just wait till you see who our next guest will be. And ma salama. As always, keep it positive.